Our next story is about corruption. This is a global problem. It plagues a number of countries, but some more than others. Among those at the top of the list.
What if I were to tell you that one single company would take over an entire nation, poisoning a country's water supply with cancer-causing substances, destroying the nature and livelihood of millions, a business in control of a major company's own national military, with full control of their government, using propaganda and killing protesters who get in their way? Well, this is what has been happening with Shell in Nigeria. Shell, a business owned by some of the biggest royal families in the world, has now quite literally colonized an entire country. They have developed a blueprint for companies around the world to take over nations. It's a story that has been covered up internationally. Propaganda runs really deep because if people know the extent of the story, there will be a global outrage, and it's time someone talk about it. So how did Shell take over the nation of Nigeria and its resources? Well, as a foreign entity seeking to take over any nation, there are several steps that you have to take. The initial and the most obvious step when taking over foreign nation is first deciding which one will be the target. The location needs to have untapped resources, whether it be people, mineral resources or oil. If you can get all three, that's all perfect. And it's even better if these are the things the majority of the country's revenue come from, whether it be gold, uranium, diamond, or the most prolific of them all, oil. Secondly, the company needs to be able to control the government, and although this can be done with force, it's much easier and more effective to secure influence over a country using money. That way, no one notices and everyone wins. So which country fulfills this criterion? Where could Shell find a nation with untapped oil resources and an easily bribable government and military? Well, it just so happened that there was one perfect country crossing all these boxes on the checklist: Nigeria. So now it was time for step 2, making Nigerian officials completely dependent on Shell. So how would you get Nigerian officials dependent on a single business? Well, you have to control their main export. In the case of Nigeria, this is oil. So the process was simple. One of the main ways that Shell would take control of Nigeria was by controlling the oil extraction infrastructure. To do this, Shell would tell the Nigerian government that we would develop your country, give you loads of jobs, give you tons of foreign investment, if we are given the permission to build the oil extraction infrastructure. And at first, this seems like a great deal for the Nigerian government. Being a poor country in need of foreign direct investment, they want foreign companies to build up Nigeria's infrastructure, because if they do this, it means there's more investment in the country, there's more jobs, more prosperity, more tasks, and better development for the country. So having this big multinational company offer to develop better extraction method for your main oil exports seems to be a win-win, right? Only that Shell is doing this for their own selfish motive. Because even though all the infrastructure will be on Nigerian land, Shell was the ones who would actually own and operate it, which meant that in the later years, Nigeria would become completely dependent on Shell for keeping about 1,000 Nigerian oil wells running, and with 95% of Nigerian export being oil, this then makes up to 40% of their total economy. And now, since Shell had the control of the flow of oil in the country, they can now oversee almost half of Nigeria's total cash flow. And as Henry Kissinger said, whoever controls the money controls the world. And it was this factor that gave Shell unparalleled influence over the nation as a whole. This was a genius business move, because if Nigeria ever tried to change the deal and take back control of their oil, Shell and other oil companies could halt the extraction process, deliberately decimating the entire country's economy. And because of Shell's powerful connection to the British and Dutch rural families, as well as all other major banks, they would tell other big companies to pull out from their investments in Nigeria, thus stripping Nigeria of everything, strangling the country into submission. Shell also controls the distribution network for the oil, so even if by some miracle Nigeria managed to gain control of the extraction process, they will still need Shell to export it out of the country. And this oil money doesn't just fuel Nigeria's economy, it also makes up over 65% of the Nigerian government's revenue, which means that Shell is the Nigerian government grandmaster. Is this reliance on Shell infrastructure that really mirrors an abusive relationship where the company can do whatever they want and the Nigerian government is so powerless to stop them? If Shell sees their oil extraction, it will push the economy into a deep recession, or while leaving the government penniless and unable to do anything. This problem will quickly lead to civil unrest and revolt, a fact that the Nigerian government is very aware of. Shell also pushed an agenda of over-reliance on oil. You see, before the oil boom in 1956, Nigeria was exporting food cash crops like palm oil, cocoa, rubber and cotton. It will also interest you to know that Malaysia obtained palm oil seed from Nigeria in 1980s to establish their palm oil industry. But the moment crude oil was discovered in Nigeria, Shell and other foreign bodies convinced the Nigerian government to abandon all other sectors so they could pay attention to the sector that was bringing money to the economy. This was deliberately done because they know that when Nigerians become over-reliant on oil, they will become extremely vulnerable to their tactics. But then, why is the Nigerian government so passive to Shell? Why did they even let this to happen in the first place? Well, this leads us onto the third stage of controlling a nation: bribery. Bribery is one of the significant factors that contributed to Shell's overtake of Nigeria. Once Shell had Nigeria dependent on oil, it was time to make their way into the government. Recently, an anti-corruption investigation revealed that Shell transferred Nigeria $1.3 billion. Knowing that the funds will end up in the pockets of convicted money launderers, Shell was not worried. Once Nigeria received the $1.3 billion, it was then transferred to various middlemen instead of being spent on the country. Afterwards, $466 million of that was given to the Nigerian president and his subordinates. In return, Shell gained access to the OPL 245 oil field, which increased the company's total oil reserve by 1/3.
The EFCC is investigating whether the $1.3 billion purchase of OPL 245 in 2011, in their words, included acts of conspiracy, bribery, official corruption and money laundering. The Nigerian court case is the latest of several inquiries following those by Dutch and Italian authorities into the purchase of OPL 245, which could hold up to 9.23 billion barrels of crude oil.
Despite Shell and Nigeria's government enjoying their mutually beneficial relationship, this bribery wasn't exactly extended towards the Nigerian civilians. Instead of reaping the country's newfound wealth, the majority of the population was hit with a seemingly never-ending streams of oil spills, attributing to the already anarchy and death in the state. Although the Niger Delta region is placed with natural resources, this region is the poorest in the country. Starting from 2010, nearly 3,000 oil spills have been recorded and attributed to Shell, with at least 29 million liters getting drained in Nigerian waters. For reference, that's enough oil to fill over 11 Olympic-sized swimming pools. These oil spills would then pollute the entire country's water supplies. So by now, the water that Nigerians drink is poisoned with cancer-causing substances that also kill the surrounding nature, taking away the nature of farming and fishing industries that many Nigerians depend on for their livelihood. Further impoverishing and poisoning in Nigerian.
The pollution is there, the problem is there, so we cannot go to the river, and being as we based on fishing, there is no any other way we can live with our family. Please and please.
Animals themselves, like probably this thing we don't see again because of the gas. This oil spill don't kill our crops.
Making Nigeria more and more dependent to Shell to give them money. As you can imagine, the local population wasn't all too happy with the constant oil spills, which lead us to number 4 in taking over a country: controlling the civilians. While the methods of achieving this can vary from location to location, Shell has perfected controlling the populace. How could you make the citizens of a country passive to your wrongdoings? How would you make them content with drinking cancer-causing water and having the entire country controlled by one company? If Shell couldn't control the civilians soon enough, their control of the country would collapse. People would revolt and time was ticking. Shell needed to come up with a plan soon. And so what do you think that Shell did? Well, they kept their head and denied all wrongdoing.
Now on Nigeria, I think the court made a few rulings which are very important. The first ruling is it ruled that all the 4 cases were sabotage, so not actually done by Shell, they were actually by criminals who steal products. The second one is it therefore dismissed all the NGO claims from Friends of the Earth.
In fact, up until 2011, Shell only claimed responsibility for less than 40,000 gallons of oil spill, or around 0.5% of the actual number. And with the growing money and power that Shell was harvesting from Nigeria, their denying any wrongdoing wasn't going to last. Shell needed to act like all good dictatorship and authoritarian governments, using all their power to squash any dissent with propaganda, using the money they extracted from Nigeria to destroy every opposition coming from Nigeria. Now, Shell has a long history in trying to sway public opinion in their favor, but this hasn't been strictly through traditional means. Back in the 60s, Shell would secretly fund a number of articles that stoked the flame of a civil war in Nigeria. The company would then play both sides against each other, which seems to promise the Nigerian people their resources which were theirs once the war was over. However, this was all smoke and mirrors. The deal still gave Shell full control of Nigeria's oil, and the company would even come up with more unique methods of propaganda. The effectiveness of Shell's new propaganda is the ability to blur the line between truth and lies. Leaks and internal documents show Shell's real strategy of refocusing the narrative and attempting to point out the environmental progression that
UK, 1.4 million households use 100% renewable electricity from Shell.
The company's first target was charity and NGOs. Shell would separate groups between ones that would never support them and the ones that might. Shell would then attempt to sway the middle-of-the-road NGOs by attacking the aspect that criticizes Shell, which basically means that if any organization protests about Shell's misdeed, the other companies will simply counter that they are making green environmental changes, whilst also bribing charities and NGOs to turn a blind eye. Shell would then also focus on swaying international news organizations over their side. To do this, they will use the same tactics they did with the NGOs, but this time, they will also overplay the significance of criminals dredging into oil pipes and causing spills. They will make this bogus claim that 98% of all the spills was because of the Nigerian sabotage, blaming Nigerian radicals and criminals for the damage that Shell was actually doing. This news misdirection strategy then takes away blame from Shell and instead focuses it towards the Nigerian people. And now, this propaganda helped internationally, but this PR maneuver wasn't swaying the Nigerian civilians. While it was effective in publicly muddying waters, there was still massive civil unrest in Nigeria. People were sick of Shells exploiting their resources, their nature, their jobs and their livelihood, impoverishing their people and giving them cancer. There was an uproar throughout the country and Shell was in big trouble. The time was running out for Shell. They needed to do something drastic. How could they keep the populace quiet? How could they force the population to be passive? How would they disassociate the problem from themselves? This was a hard thing to do as Shell was openly destroying the country. Tens of millions of people relied on fishing for their livelihood, yet this constant oil spillage were poisoning the coast and devastating Nigeria's fishing operations. All this bribery and propaganda wasn't just enough. Which brings us to the fifth and final stage in Shell's takeover of Nigeria, and this was to eliminate any opposition with force. You see, by this point, the Nigerian civilians were on the brink of revolution. People were realizing that they had been colonized by one single company, and so the Nigerian population began to protest, and one of these unrelenting protesters was a man named Ken Saro-Wiwa, president of the movement for the survival of the Ogoni people. This organization did a non-violent campaign against Shell's tyranny of Nigeria, and so of course, Shell wasn't particularly fond of this protest of Saro-Wiwa. In fact, these protests were threatening Shell's complete control of the country, and so Shell allegedly tasked the Nigerian military to do their
We are going to demand our rights peacefully, non-violently, and we shall win.
In an area where land is in very high demand, is completely destructive of the community.
Throughout Ken Saro-Wiwa's lifetime, there had been around 7,000 oil spills that contaminated the country's nature. Ken Saro-Wiwa eventually had enough. He was sick of the Nigerian population becoming impoverished, sick, and the nature surrounding him collapsing. And so, he would organize multiple non-violent protests against the exploitation of Nigerian land, in addition to the lack of civilian financial benefits. This was causing Shell to stop putting their heads out. They were never going to give in to the protesters' demand, and yet getting directly involved in crushing these protesters would be bad for their Shell's reputations. Charities and NGOs would no longer support Shell if they started crushing dissent. The international community will shun Shell forever. Shell might even get a bad ESG score, so Shell had to get the middleman to do their dirty works, and luckily for them, the Nigerian military had no problem getting their hands dirty as long as they were getting those juicy bribes.
Shell not only requested the presence of the Nigerian military at peaceful protests, which would result in violent incidents, but they also paid them. They fed the soldiers as well. So Shell's role really is as a collaborator. They may not have tied the noose around Ken's neck, they might not have pulled the trigger, but essentially they facilitated human rights abuses in the Niger Delta.
And so after around 5 years of the protest, Shell finally turned. They finally had enough and ordered the arrest of Ken Saro-Wiwa and 8 other tribal leaders, despite the protests being peaceful, and the men were indicted for murder and subsequently executed by the Nigerian government.
I said yesterday that I thought this was a fraudulent trial, a bad verdict, an unjust sentence, and it has now been followed by judicial murder. I don't think that is acceptable. I see no way in which it can be defended. And if the Harare principles mean anything, I do not myself see how Nigeria can stay in the Commonwealth until they return to democratic government.
Here's what really happened. When the protesters were having their non-violent protests, the Nigerian government ordered their military to invade the Ogoni region and to stop the protesters. 18 Nigerians dead, almost 600 homes burned down. In April 1993, the military wounded 11 protesters against a new pipeline. They came to the Ogoni society, looted their resources, even raped their women and burned down their houses.
Military men rape the women, torture you, they loot our properties, and they were burning houses.
Weeks later, the military opened fire at protesters. Then when Shell realized that the military were poorly equipped to protect their hardware as well as track down on the protesters and destroying them completely, Shell then provided the Nigerian military government with guns, helicopters and other tools. Then Shell partnered with the Nigerian government to take out Ken Saro-Wiwa and his Mossad group forever. 3 weeks later, the Sani Abacha government armed some unknown gunmen, youth in the Ogoni region, to murder 4 Ogoni chiefs, framing it to be a mob of angry youths. These chiefs are people who were against Ken Saro-Wiwa activism and publicly criticized him. Then the Nigerian government then took it over from there. They accused Ken Saro-Wiwa and his group of murder and inciting civil unrest in the country. Then the Sani Abacha government bribed some few persons to give false testimonials against Saro-Wiwa and his group. Even though Ken Saro-Wiwa wasn't in Nigeria at the time of these incidents, he was still charged for murders. He and the Ogoni leaders, otherwise known as the Ogoni, were then jailed for 1 year before hanging them on November 10, 1985. Everyone knew that Shell was responsible for this, and so the company agreed to fork over a relative merger of $9.6 million in an act of court settlement. After cutting off the heads of these protesters, life for normal Nigerian civilians hasn't really improved, and in fact, it has just further cemented Shell's control of the entire country, which is why radical agitators have begun taking matters into their own hands. Groups around Nigeria have started sabotaging pipelines in Nigeria, leading to even more oil spillage throughout the nation. It is advently giving Shell more and more excuse to control the protests. Additionally, numerous oil company staff were kidnapped and held for ransom by a new militia group called the Movement of the Emancipation of the Niger Delta region. Although a ceasefire was called in 2009, this also didn't help matters, either as the Nigerian government will go on to announce an all-out oil war in the country. Shell and the Nigerian government against the impoverished, poisoned population. Because Shell is almost monarchy in Nigeria, it's going to take an entire revolution to get them out of the country. And to do this, it's going to almost certainly require a third-party intervention, since the government and the military are entirely in Shell's pocket, and there's no sign of Shell slowing down anytime soon. As the military conflict regarding the oil operations in the Niger Delta is only getting worse daily, violence is commonplace in this area, whether it be oil bunkering, piracy, kidnappings, bombings or other insurgency campaigns, all while Nigerian resources are being poisoned by the day and the population becoming more and more impoverished, and why the Western media praises Shell and their progressivism, claiming that Shell is helping the environment by keeping climate change. I mean, Shell has literally taken over control of Nigeria, and yet there's still really no backlash from the West, because the West love the fact that Nigerians and all other African countries are dependent on foreign countries to move as a nation, to be progressive and to be productive as a nation. They love it that way because when a country, an African country, gain independence and become independent of any power is a threat to them. This is why there is support of Shell taking over Nigeria as a whole. So if a company planning to economically subverting a country, following Shell footsteps isn't a bad place to start. We just hope that a generation of Nigerians will awake someday and then break this yoke of foreign interventions on Nigeria's economy and liberate ourselves from this anarchy and wickedness that have been perpetrated by Western companies on Nigerian soil. Thanks for watching. See you soon.